Hi guys, Rachel van der Gugten here again. I'm going to talk about gut health because that's another question that's come in on the Facebook page, and I think it's a really big topic, and I'm probably not going to cover it in as much detail at the moment as I will later on. I'll go into certain parts of it in a series later, but right now I just want to touch on the major thing about gut health. And it's an interesting one because gut health is it's a really big issue for most people, and that's mainly because we're eating the wrong things and we're not processing the things that we are eating well. So it's a two-pronged issue. You can address the foods that you're eating, and that will affect your gut health a huge amount, mainly because if you're eating a normal modern Western diet of high carbohydrates, mostly refined processed foods, that's going to damage your gut a huge degree because you're basically flooding yourself with fermentable carbohydrates all the time. And your body is not designed to have that kind of refined starch and chemicals going through it all the time, and it will cause a lot of inflammation, and it will disrupt your gut microbiome. So in your intestines, where you've got all of your healthy bacteria and they're living in symbiotic relationship with yeasts, you need to have the right balance of nutrients to feed the good bacteria and not feed the yeasts. And unfortunately, eating a high carbohydrate diet actually promotes yeast growth rather than promoting good bacterial growth. So it's not a diet that's going to do anyone any favors. So the first thing I say for good gut health is stop eating all the carbs. Stop eating all the refined carbohydrate products, so bread, pasta, rice, anything made with starch in high quantities. And chuck all that out and go back to eating real food. So meat, dairy, eggs, fish, nuts and seeds, and vegetables. And make that the mainstay of your diet because they're all nutrient dense and your body knows what to do with them. Your intestinal lining generally will not be damaged from consuming those foods. They're natural, healthy foods. So if you're focusing just on eating whole foods, that already is going to do a really big favor to your gut and help you digest foods a lot better. It'll reduce bloating, reduce gas, reduce a lot of the symptoms of discomfort and pain that you might get after eating foods. And most of that's just caused because you're eating too many carbohydrates. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, if you want your gut to work well, you've got to start at the top. Well, top, what you put in your mouth, that's the first thing. Secondary to that, what is the food doing in your stomach? Is it being broken down correctly? Is your stomach functioning how it should? So one thing that I see by far more than anything else in my clinic is people coming in complaining of digestive issues. And a lot of times they're being told, oh, you've got leaky gut. Oh, you've got, probiotic problems, or your bacteria is all out of whack, or oh, you have a lactose intolerance, or you have a gluten intolerance. And a lot of people have been diagnosed with certain gut issues, or they have IBS or Crohn's disease, or you name it. I've encountered most of it. Celiacs. There's a lot of different names and labels you can give to digestive dysfunction, and it'll affect people in different places. But really what it all comes down to is your gut is not functioning how it's supposed to. And the starting point for all of that is your stomach. Okay, and it's the most overlooked part of the gut that I find all the time. Everyone's talking about intestinal health and making sure your intestines are going well. But actually, if you're not taking care of your stomach, what's the point? Because everything that gets into your intestines is getting there because your stomach has to either do a job or not. And if you want to improve your gut health, you really need to focus on the stomach. And that means looking at, is your stomach acidic enough? Okay, that's the main thing that you need to be focusing on. Your stomach should be producing acid that is literally strong enough to dissolve just about anything. It's pH 1 or 2. That's pretty much the strongest acid you can get. It's called hydrochloric acid. And your stomach produces that in response to getting ready to eat, eating the meal, and then processing the meal. And the pH will go really low, meaning it'll be really strong acid in order to process all of that food. And then in between the meals, it'll rise a little bit to 3. And usually it stays around that level if it's a healthy stomach. What I'm seeing, more than anything, is that people's stomach acid production is shutting down. And the reason that's happening is mainly because we're living in an environment of extreme stress, lack of sleep, and nutrient deficiencies, okay? It is not, our environment is not what it used to be. We're not living in a world where we are going slow. You know, we drive somewhere and it takes a day because we're on a horse. You have lots of time to think and process. We're living in such a fast-paced world. Our stress levels are through the roof. You're constantly under mental stress, anxiety, tension, overthinking stuff. Just trying to plan your day and get everything crammed in can create stress for some people. And why I talk about that is because your stomach acid shuts down whenever there's stress. And that's a physiological process that's going to protect you, because in a stressful moment, your body only has so many resources and it needs to divert the resources to where it's needed most. So if you're stressed, either because of internal processes that are stressing you out or external situations that are causing you to feel stressed, then your body goes into fight and flight mode and you start producing a ton of adrenaline, and that adrenaline shunts blood up to your brain and your muscles so that you can think fast and run away. And in that moment, your body prioritizes and says, hey, it's more important for you to think really clearly and run away than it is for you to digest your sandwich. Who cares about the sandwich if you're going to die from a bear? That's the primitive response, okay? But when that happens daily, because your stress is never ending, what happens is that your stomach acid is constantly shut down. That means that you're producing acid at a much higher pH, meaning it's a very weak acid all the time. And what that affects is your ability to absorb nutrients. It affects your ability to be protected against infections. And it affects your ability to break down protein correctly. They're the three main things that are affected by stomach acid. So if you aren't making stomach acid correctly, your ability to break down protein is going to be affected, and that means you'll have heaps of food allergies. Some people react to gluten, some people react to casein, which is the dairy protein. Some people react to fish. Some people react to all kinds of grain proteins. Some people react to legumes. It really doesn't matter what the protein is, you're gonna probably have trouble breaking it down at some time or another. And this is when a lot of people come to me going, I can't figure out what foods affect me because it seems to be this one day and then this another day, and I'm constantly feeling sick and I don't know why. Usually it's because your stomach acid has shut down and you're not breaking down protein correctly. And it'll depend how stressed you were in the moment, what food you ate, the protein content, as to how it's going to affect you. That also affects your seasonal allergies like pollen, dust mites, house mites, cats and dogs and feathers and anything that you could potentially react to, because any true allergy reaction is to a protein. And research is really interesting, showing how stomach acid pH actually protects you against allergy symptoms. Because if your stomach acid is working like it's supposed to, it actually neutralizes any of the proteins that is in contact with your body, meaning that you don't get an immune response to protein. So if you have seasonal allergies or you have food intolerances, first thing I say is focus on stomach acid. Get your stomach acid working properly so that you can then break down those proteins correctly, all right? Second thing your stomach affects is your immune response. If you're in contact with viruses, bacteria, fungus, doesn't matter, parasites, whatever it is, it's all coming into your stomach. And if your pH of your stomach is not correct, meaning your acid is not strong enough, then you're not going to actually kill those bacteria or viruses or parasites very well, and they can get through into your small intestine. So you'll see that, for example, if you go on a trip somewhere and you're with a group of people and you all eat at the same restaurant, you all eat the same food, but only one person gets sick. That one person got sick because their stomach acid was really low, and the food actually got through with the bacteria or the virus into their intestines, and it created a sickness reaction, basically. Whereas the rest of the people at the table may have had better stomach acid, and it protected them from the same infection. So your best defense against infections actually is having really good functioning stomach acid. You'll notice some people never get sick. They power through their day. They're never susceptible to, viruses and bacteria and all the stuff that's going around. It's very likely they're producing a ton of stomach acid. So they're actually breaking down nutrients correctly. They're breaking down protein properly. They're getting everything out of their food they need, and it's causing their body to work really well. And then you see another person who gets sick with everything going by. they're constantly under the weather, you know, they're never feeling great, they don't have much energy. Usually it's because their stomach acid's not working well and they're not breaking down their food correctly, which means they're not actually getting the benefits of their diet, even if they're eating really well. So that's the second thing. So viruses and bacteria, protein, and the third thing is energy production. So if your stomach acid is not working well, then you don't actually extract the nutrients from your food correctly. If you want to extract zinc, iron, B6, B12, folic acid, vitamin D, vitamin A, and there's a couple others, you need stomach acid to be in the right balance. So having really strong pH in order for all of those to be released from the foods. And the reason that they're all hard to break down if you don't have enough stomach acid is because they're actually bound up mostly in protein foods. And if you're not breaking down protein food because your stomach acid's not working, you're not going to release those nutrients from the foods, which means you could be eating the most healthy diet in the world, but if you don't have good stomach acid levels, then you're not actually going to get the benefits of it. So those are three areas that are going to affect you. And I read some really interesting research about stomach acid called 3 Years of Hydrochloric Acid Therapy. If any of you want to go and read that, it's one of the most fascinating articles I've read about stomach acid. It's an article that was written in the 1930s about research that was going on with doctors around the world who were using hydrochloric acid as a therapy with clients. And they were finding hydrochloric acid therapy, either intravenously or orally, was able to kill off typhoid, TB, cancer in a lot of cases. It was dealing with all kinds of digestive issues, skin disorders, you name it, they were using it for everything. It was the sort of treatment of the day back in the 1930s. But it fell out of favor after World War II and all of the pharmaceutical companies started up, because hydrochloric acid is not something that you can patent. So there was really not much interest in selling it and marketing it. And doctors just didn't know about it after that. It became a forgotten treatment. I use it a lot in my clinic, mainly because if you have digestive problems, if you have energy issues, if you have immune function problems, if you find that when you eat you feel bloated or nauseous, or you feel heavy, or you get diarrhea, or you're constipated, it's worth investigating how your stomach is doing, and it's worth addressing that potential problem. And it's something that's really simple to do. You can either do it at home just with using apple cider vinegar and lemon juice before you eat, just acidifying your stomach naturally, or you can take a supplement that's betaine hydrochloric acid, which is literally like for like with your stomach acid. And that'll actually compensate for the lack of stomach acid. One of the reasons I think we have low stomach acid now also is because of our diet composition. So if you look at what we're eating, most of us are eating really high carbohydrate diets. And according to research, the only two nutrients that stimulate stomach acid are protein and salt. Okay, and if you think back, like put yourself in someone's shoes 150 years ago. You didn't have access to refined carbohydrates like we have now. So their whole diet was not based on wheat and grains and rice and processed foods. They were eating natural whole foods, which were higher generally in protein and had a lot more salt, mainly because all the food before refrigeration was preserved in salt. So they were consuming heaps of salt all the time. Pickled vegetables, salted, brined, sauerkrauts, salted dried meats, you name it, food was salted because that was the method of preservation. And what we know from research is that salt stimulates stomach acid because you use the chloride part of sodium chloride, which is salt, to make hydrochloric acid. And hydrochloric acid is your stomach acid. So if you have very low chloride coming into your body, you're going to be limited by how much stomach acid you can make. So go back to eating heaps of salt. Don't be afraid of salting your food. It's one of the most important things you can do, not just for your stomach acid, but there's a number of different things that salt is important for. Just make sure you're using a really mineral-rich salt that's Himalaya salt or sea salt, and not just the straight sodium chloride, just because that is, it's hyper-processed and not that great for you anyway. So those are some things you can do. I recommend eating a high protein, high fat diet and low carbohydrate for stomach acid issues because it stimulates stomach acid production. Just be aware, however, that if you do that, you need to give yourself time to adjust to the diet because even though it's the diet you may need to get your stomach acid working well, you won't tolerate it that well if you don't have stomach acid in the beginning. So a lot of people with stomach acid problems will feel nauseous at the thought of eating eggs or meat or heavy protein foods like cheese, or high like sour cream or cream, high fat, high protein. So go slow if you're going to do it. Slowly increase your protein intake while decreasing your carbohydrate intake, and be drinking things like apple cider vinegar, lemon juice, taking sauerkraut and pickled vegetables to try and stimulate that stomach acid. That's what I would do for gut health. And usually what I would say to people, if they struggle with candida, or they're struggling with, gut dysbiosis of any kind, start with the stomach first, because usually those problems sort themselves out once your pH is correct in your stomach. So once you get your stomach pH correct, then your liver will function properly, your pancreas will function, your intestinal function will get better, because the pH of the food in your stomach is going into the intestine at the right pH, which means you're signaling bile production and enzyme production correctly. It's enabling the right kind of bacteria to grow in your intestines and suppressing the harmful yeasts because the pH is correct. When the pH is the right level, so really acidic, then your gut bacteria will come back to the right healthy levels, because they can only thrive in a slightly more acidic environment than the yeast. Yeast needs a much more alkaline environment. So when your stomach acid is shut down, that promotes the growth of yeast. So a lot of people will struggle with candida overgrowth and yeast overgrowths in their body, and have fungal infections and stuff. And that's often a really good sign that somebody's struggling with stomach acid problems. And when you correct that, it corrects the yeast problems. So there's just a few things to get you going. Gut health is a major issue. Focus on your stomach. That gives you the best results. If that doesn't fix everything, then there are other, smaller things you can do down the line. But I've found even just addressing stomach acid will deal with most people's protein intolerances and improve their allergy symptoms and all kinds of things. Some people have actually been able to eat meat, for example, that they could never eat before because their stomach acid was too low. And once they, improved their stomach acid, they could actually eat something. I've had people who, vomited regularly because they couldn't stomach food. And as soon as they improved their stomach acid, they were not vomiting anymore. It's a really important, and I would say most overlooked issue in our health is actually stomach acid. That's why I've taken the time to really go through this in detail. This is a super long video. Thanks for sticking with me if you've watched this whole thing. But if there's one thing you can do for your health, just about more than anything else, it's making sure your stomach is working well. Enjoy, and hope you have a great day.